This is World of Africa, and I'm Eric Njoka. Welcome to the show. This week, Kenyans are apprehensive of a new plan to increase taxes after President William Ruto sent new finance bill proposals to Parliament. Despite Ruto's campaign promises of lowering the high cost of living among the poor, the hustlers, as he refers to them, his latest proposal of increased taxes could further distance him from struggling Kenyans. We will talk about that a little later. This episode begins in Central Africa. According to a recently completed annual assessment by the IMF, growth in the Democratic Republic of Congo sharply rebounded from 1.7% in 2020 to an estimated 6.2% in 2021, well above the 4.5% rate in sub-Saharan Africa. The strong recovery was driven by the country's mining and services sector performance. Even though the country is doing great on one end, that has not trickled down to the citizens who are outraged by the rate of insecurity, living conditions, and cases of sexual abuse in the East. Let's find out what's going on in the Congo.
The weekend was just about to set in Democratic Republic of Congo's capital, Kinshasa. Protesters, mainly drawn from the opposition, gathered to raise their dismay and fury against not having money in their pockets to afford even the basics like food. Their demonstrations were met by a menacing police force who charged at the demonstrators in efforts to disperse them.
We came here to march peacefully. You said that we are in a democratic country. We are in a democracy. But why are you prohibiting like this? Look at the police. They are throwing gas, pulling people by their clothes. This is not normal.
The protesters are angry over the rising cost of living and prolonged insecurity in the east of the country, where armed militias and rebel groups have killed hundreds and displaced over 1 million. Congo is due to hold a general election on the 20th of December, when President Felix Tshisekedi is expected to seek a second term. However, political tension is on the rise in the world's leading cobalt producer, with some opposition candidates complaining of delays and alleged irregularities in a voter registration drive.
It's sad. You see, they are shooting with tear gas. At the beginning, it was with real bullets. And all this is Mr. Tshisekedi. It's very sad. We were with him in the opposition, and if one doesn't even have the respect for the Congolese people who want to march because there is a high cost of living, nothing is working in the country. There is corruption. It's sad.
While the capital was burning, the country's east was facing another problem. A group of displaced women from the Bulengo camp returned with bundles of firewood on their backs to sell to other displaced people and the local population. They took the risk of going out despite the increasing risk of being raped. One of the women, who has experienced this horror along with her friends, sits with her hands covering her face.
I was ashamed to tell the neighbors, but I went to tell the doctors. I told them what had happened to me, so they gave me treatment. They were women who work at MSF. I don't know their names, but I know where they work because I went there for treatment after I was raped. I felt dirty.
Rape has been widely documented as a weapon of war by armed militia groups that have been active in Congo's east since the end of 2 civil wars waged between 1996 and 2003. Unrest escalated after a group known as the M23 staged a major offensive in North Kivu province last year, forcing hundreds of thousands to flee as the army fought back. Many have sought refuge in crowded camps like Bulengo, where humanitarian workers are struggling to support hundreds of displaced people sharing white tents set up on a muddy field. Hungry mouths to feed push women outside the camp to search for food and firewood to sell, making them vulnerable to sex crimes.
Since we started community outreach and awareness-raising activities in the sites, we noticed an increase in cases of sexual violence in the camp. And this is as a result of lack of food. So the women are forced to go into the fields, into the bush to look for what to eat and to look for small bits of wood to sell so that they can buy some food. And that's when they all become exposed to sexual violence.
UNICEF reports that gender-based violence in North Kivu was 37% higher during the first 3 months of 2023 as compared to the same period in 2022, when more than 38,000 cases were recorded. Most survivors reported being attacked by armed and displaced men in and around the camps. Humanitarian workers have also raised concern about the military. Bureau Report WION, World is One.
The conflict in Sudan has put the lives of millions of children at risk. Thousands have escaped, but many are still trapped in the escalating violence. The United Nations Children's Agency says the closure of schools has also affected their mental health and well-being, and says the country is facing what it calls a generational catastrophe. This next report starts from Cairo, Egypt, where many have found a safe haven.
They found a new home in Giza, Egypt. Most of these children are victims of the ongoing fighting in Sudan. Their families fled when the warring generals intensified their barrage of strikes on citizens. Sana Mahmoud says her daughter still wakes up at night screaming because of the gunfire and airstrikes that rocked her neighborhood.
They saw everything. The gunfire was falling on us at home. They saw the events and the fire. They saw horrible scenes. She still screams at night and cries out to me, "Why are these people coming to kill us?" And I tell her, the planes are flying above us. When she sees the plane, she comes running, saying, "Mom, the plane has come, Mom. These people are coming for us at home. They're coming to beat us." I tell her that the plane is just flying and not targeting us.
UNICEF, the UN Children's Agency, says 368,000 children have been forced out of their homes in Sudan, and a further 82,000 have fled into neighboring states. It estimates 190 children were killed in the first 10 days of the conflict, and around 1,700 are left injured.
Children, of course, in Sudan are bearing the heaviest brunt of the hostilities. Before the conflict, children were already caught in a perfect storm of crisis on top of crisis. And what this conflict has done is that it has further aggravated the already ongoing health and nutrition crisis, the water scarcity crisis, and it's deepened the learning crisis.
In Port Sudan on the Red Sea, where thousands of people have fled in the hope of evacuation, a group of artists have volunteered to organize recreational activities for children to alleviate the pressures on their mental health.
We have a number of cases for children who have post-traumatic stress disorder who were transferred to the psychiatric hospital. We also have similar cases among adults who were already under treatment, and we transferred them to the hospitals. The thing that we can do now for children is to support them and alleviate the bad psychological impacts on them.
Children in conflict-affected areas in the Sudan continue to be affected by grave violations within an unstable political environment and the worsening humanitarian situation. Also worrying is the increased number of attacks on schools and hospitals, and of denial of humanitarian access that affected the delivery of life-saving aid to children. Organizations have reiterated that schools and hospitals must be unconditionally protected from attack and from military use. The two warring groups, Sudan's army and paramilitary group called Rapid Support Forces, have so far breached 7 ceasefire agreements. The fighting continues. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
In the run-up to Kenya's 2022 polls, economic issues, particularly public debt and joblessness, took center stage. The Kenya Kwanza team, led by William Ruto, suggested that Kenya had overborrowed, a habit they pledged to stop. The proposals in the 2023 finance bill, some of which were rejected by the previous parliaments, paint a picture of a government that is keen on giving its revenue authorities stronger teeth to bite while making it expensive to appeal tax demands in the event of a dispute. Here's a report from Nairobi.
What do artificial nails, cryptocurrencies, and social media influencers have in common? They are all being targeted by Kenya's taxman. This as part of new proposals aimed at filling the coffers of President William Ruto's cash-strapped government. Ruto is seeking to repair a heavily indebted economy inherited from his predecessor, Uhuru Kenyatta, who ramped up borrowing to fund a splurge on costly infrastructure projects. Despite pledging to improve the lot of impoverished Kenyans during last year's election campaign, Ruto is now taking the politically unpopular step of raising taxes.
Maybe your client is used to the price which you normally charge. If it's 1,500, now you see the breads have gone up, the oil, everything. When your client comes and then you tell her, now you have to add 200, you find it difficult because even her, she doesn't have the amount to add. So you just charge the 1,500 as usual, but you have to cater for the loss.
Ruto's government has drawn up a $26 billion budget for financial year 2024, with the proposed new taxes expected to generate nearly $3 billion. Opponents have warned that the measures will hit small businesses at the very heart of the economy, as well as households struggling to make ends meet.
Because of how things are going, we are forced to use shortcuts. But even with the shortcuts, we have traffic jams. Things are not going well. People are not even going to the petrol station anymore.
The prices have overwhelmed me. I've never seen increases like this before. Prices have gone up and up and up. We were selling them at 30 Kenyan shillings. Now we're selling them at 80 Kenyan shillings.
East Africa's most dynamic economy has been hit hard by drought and the fallout from the Ukraine war that sent inflation soaring and GDP growth sliding. The central bank in March trimmed its 2023 GDP forecast to 5.8%, slower than the 6.1% predicted earlier. Kenya is also laboring under a $70 billion debt mountain, spooking credit ratings agencies including Moody's, which downgraded the country's sovereign debt rating further into junk territory. Ruto insists he is making the right decisions to get the economy and government finances back on track.
It's us, the riders, who are suffering. Because anything that is adding the cost or doing anything, it's falling on us. You see now, because there's no way you can go and tell a customer that because of the hike of the fuel, that you will add even a single coin.
Veteran opposition leader Raila Odinga is threatening to call Kenyans back onto the streets over what he has branded a tsunami of taxes. Earlier this year, he led a series of anti-government demonstrations over the cost of living crisis.
Mr. Ruto has asked me and Azimio to enter into a constitutional, open-ended and binding dialogue with his government to find a resolution to the issues that we in Azimio have raised about the last year's election and the key governance and cost of living issues facing our country.
The public had until May 20 to comment on the finance bill before it is debated by lawmakers. If passed, it will need presidential approval to become law. The country's national treasury will deliver the budget statement to Parliament on June 15th. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
A new drought-resilient semi-dwarf wheat gene, which can be grown in drier soil conditions, discovered by an international team of scientists, has given new hope of sowing the crop in water-limited environments. This is a welcome relief for Morocco, which has been reporting sharp declines in common wheat, durum wheat, and barley production due to extreme drought conditions emanating from the impacts of climate change in the country. Here now is a report.
This is a cereals market in Salé, Morocco. Grain baskets are brimming with wheat, but all is not as it seems.
Everything is more expensive: fertilizers, insecticides, and petrol. Farmers are really suffering. We thank the researchers because they make some new and excellent crops that help the farmers. These crops are encouraging the farmers to carry on working. Without them, the farmers would have abandoned this profession and left because the old crops no longer give a good harvest.
Research to develop new varieties of several types of wheat and barley has started to yield results in Morocco. Over the past decade, the International Center for Agricultural Research and the dry areas in Morocco's National Institute for Agricultural Research have developed 6 new varieties of durum wheat and barley. These resilient crops reach up to 30% increase in productivity during times of drought without sacrificing nutritional quality.
In the year of drought, these varieties shows a yield of an improved yield of 30% compared to the other varieties, the old varieties. So with this improvement, we believe that we could face this challenge and address the issue of food sovereignty, and we will approach to this food sovereignty because Morocco, generally when there is these years of drought, we rely on importing cereals from other countries.
As climate change intensifies, this type of advancement in agricultural research is crucial in stabilizing yields in Moroccan farms. A strategy called Generation Green was launched by the Ministry of Agriculture to expand direct seeding of wheat to 1 million hectares, which would make up to 25% of all Moroccan agriculture.
Our objective is that the varieties we developed, thanks to our cooperation, reach the Moroccan farmers as soon as possible. Agronomical research is giving a great importance to produce crops in big quantities. We started a program to do this 3 years ago. Today, we develop new crops and we give them to the companies that have a license to produce the new crops in big quantities so that they can reach the farmers after 3 or 4 years.
Traditional ploughing involves turning the soil over, which leads to loss of water through evaporation. Researchers say that direct seeding is more efficient. The newly developed varieties of wheat can be planted through direct seeding even during drought. The North African country is also dealing with inflation. Morocco's exports-driven agricultural strategy is in question as the price of vegetables in domestic markets hits all-time highs, almost as much as supermarkets in France. To deal with drought, Morocco's government has also been paying more attention to the argan oil production sector, notably by building 13 reservoirs to collect scant rainfall and help mitigate the region's ever-worsening droughts. Rabat aims to double argan oil production by 2030, hoping to support the emergence of a new generation of the rural middle class. However, with fewer and fewer young people taking up the craft, time will tell whether another generation will learn the traditions associated with the tree. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
We all know that not many 3-year-olds can read and identify letters or even shapes, but Leto Bengo is one who can. She was first thrust into the spotlight in 2022 when her mother created a TikTok account and used it to share videos of her reading words and sentences or even sounding out letters. She is now a prodigy. Here's her story.
At 3 years old, a South African toddler reads better than 80% of the country's school children, who are over 3 times her age.
A crisp is the white on the bird's head.
Letu Kutula Bengu, whose reading skills have already made her a TikTok star with nearly 1 million followers, was this year named the youngest African kidfluencer at an annual award held by US children's TV channel Nickelodeon.
Mommy taught me how to read. This is TV book likes to romp.
Bengu's parents started teaching her how to read after she turned 2. Seeing that she could memorize and associate words and objects, especially when they went grocery shopping.
I think when you send your child to preschool, I think it's the stigma around like the teachers need to do everything, and then that's why kids when they come back home they don't actually cement the knowledge that they learned at school. So parents need to take charge of that.
Her skills are an exception in a country where 8 out of 10 fourth graders, school children aged 9 or 10, struggle to understand what they read, according to a study published this week.
We have a significant number of learners in grade 1, 2 and 3 that are not learning to read effectively. It's a problem of teachers' pedagogy, it's a problem of curriculum. So we have to address it systematically. We have to recognize that many of the practices that teachers are currently using aren't working.
Public education in South Africa is very behind. It's up to parents to make sure that our kids have a great future.
The stark difference between public institutions and private schools highlights the huge inequality that persists in the country. South Africa's educational problems are also rooted in the apartheid regime, under which most black children were taught very little in segregated schools. As a result, many of today's parents received a poor education and are unable to help their children with their learning. Meanwhile, Bengu's online fame has resulted in her parents receiving a deluge of inquiries from other parents keen to improve their children's reading skills. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
We are still in South Africa. Having lost both his legs and arms to meningitis when he was only a few months old, a 16-year-old South African is considered one of the best para-surfers in the country, and is dreaming of a chance to show his skills at the Paralympics next year. Check out his story.
Surfing, I feel stress-free. I feel like I'm in my own zone, I'm in my own shell, you see. So I don't still overthink myself, because once I hit that wave, everything just opens up and I unlock all the, I lock all the bad memories and all those stuff.
We are just a family. When we get together, we have this certain aura around us where we just enjoy and we talk and relate. Even if with our different disabilities, I can find someone who has amputated leg just as me, and we can relate over something.
And that's our show this week. Thank you very much for watching Wild of Africa with me, Eric Njoka. Find us on all our social media platforms. Your feedback is always highly appreciated. And until next week, it is goodbye from me.